He followed her into the jungle and found a baby elephant trapped and bleeding. As he worked to free it, 2 armed men appeared, and the mother stepped forward. What happened next changed everything. But first, let's go back. The rainforest swallowed sound as Derek stepped off the patrol path, each footfall muffled by the thick loam of decomposing leaves and tangled roots. Shafts of light pierced the canopy like divine fingers, spotlighting motes of pollen and dust, but even the insects seemed to hush as the elephant moved ahead. Her massive form glided with surprising grace, though a slight limp betrayed the pain she tried to hide. Her ears, once wide and expressive, drooped to the side. One still torn and raw, the edge crusted with dirt and dried blood. Derek's mind swirled with questions, but instinct had already silenced logic. There was something in the way she looked at him back in that clearing. Not panic, not wildness, but a depth of sorrow that didn't belong to beasts. It was pleading, personal. It reminded him of the night he'd pulled a child from a burning apartment in Charleston. The look the boy's mother gave him afterward. Silent, immense, too heavy for words. The jungle path was no path at all, just a winding corridor of moss-covered trunks and damp air that tasted of rot and blooming life. Vines curled like serpents from branch to branch. Derek ducked beneath them, swatted at swarms of gnats, but his eyes never left the elephant. Her skin was the color of ash after rain, dotted with the scars of a life lived too close to humanity. Bullet grooves, rope burns, old stories carved into flesh. What had been done to her? She moved with purpose, but never rushed. Occasionally she turned her head to ensure he was still behind her. Not out of fear, out of insistence. After nearly 20 minutes, Derek noticed changes in the terrain. Fresher tracks in the soil, broken branches low to the ground, a sickly sweet stench rising from ahead. He stopped, breath catching, but the elephant paused too. She stared at him, unblinking. It wasn't command. It was trust. A soft rumble vibrated through her chest, low and mournful. Then she turned again, stepping carefully over a fallen log slick with moss. Derek followed, not because he knew where she was taking him, but because something about her grief felt familiar, like the echo of a wound he hadn't yet named. Derek crouched low at the edge of the ravine, breath caught in his throat as his eyes adjusted to the dim light beneath the overhanging ferns. The air was thick here, a wet heat that clung to his skin and coiled in his lungs, making each inhale feel like a silent trespass. The ravine walls were steep, but not impassable. A natural pit carved by decades of erosion and time, its rocky contours now turned into a kill zone by human cruelty. The calf was barely alive. Its small frame, barely the height of Derek's waist, shook with each shallow breath. Deep lacerations marred its flank where the steel teeth of the trap had closed, jagged and red against the gray hide. Flies buzzed around the wound in a slow, methodical cloud. Its trunk, limp and motionless, twitched only when the mother touched it. There was no crying, no sound, just the dull wheeze of survival slipping toward failure. The mother stood on the rim, unmoving, her massive frame quivering with restrained panic. Derek could feel it like static in the air. A mother's fear calcified into stillness. Her eyes never left the calf, but she didn't go down. She couldn't. One wrong move and she'd tumble in, crushing her own child. That's why she brought him. Derek slid down the embankment, boots skidding against loose shale and moss. His hands moved on instinct, years of emergency response coiled into muscle memory. But this was different. There were no walls, no tools, no backup. Just jungle. And death. He knelt beside the snare, examining the metalwork. It wasn't amateur. Welded joints. camouflage mesh layered over pressure triggers, infrared tripwire threads weaved invisibly between the trees above. Silent alarms, like landmines for sentient creatures. This was military-grade cruelty. Whoever built this wasn't hunting. They were harvesting. The realization hit him like a body blow. The jungle wasn't just dangerous. It was watched. Derek turned off his headlamp and crouched lower, ears straining. The silence wasn't just absence. It was anticipation. He scanned the tree line above the ravine, half expecting to see a glint of glass or steel. Nothing. But the feeling remained. Heavy. Inevitable. The calf stirred faintly, a soft whimper escaping its cracked lips. Derek pressed his hand to its flank. The skin was hot, dry, too dry. It needed water. It needed freedom. But the snare was rigged. Touch the wrong wire, and it would slice the calf's leg clean through. He looked up at the mother. She didn't blink. He knew now. This wasn't a rescue. It was a race. Derek's hands trembled as he dug into the toolkit, pulling out bolt cutters, wire snips, and a tension clamp. Sweat pooled in the hollows of his collarbone, soaking into his shirt, but he forced his focus inward. The trap was a grotesque lattice of pressure-lock springs and interwoven steel arms, designed not to hold, but to torment. Every angle was intentional. Every blade serrated. He had maybe 3 minutes. 5, if luck took his side. Positioning himself between the trap's pivot points, Derek inserted the clamp, cranked slowly, then shifted his weight to slide the top jaw up. The calf moaned, a sound that was barely a sound at all, more like breath trying to find a voice in the dark. He paused, glanced up. The mother elephant's posture had changed. Her shoulders squared, ears taut. Then he heard it. Footsteps, muffled voices, cracking twigs beneath deliberate boots. Poachers. Derek didn't hesitate. He slid back into the underbrush, one arm hooked protectively around the calf's neck. Its body was warm, feverish. He crouched low, muscles straining against the roots that pressed into his spine. Above him, the mother elephant took her stand. She didn't trumpet. No threat display, no stomping, just silence and sheer presence. Her body blocked the trail, a living monolith. 2 men emerged, one wiry with a jagged scar across his cheek, the other stockier, rifle slung over his shoulder like an afterthought. Both stopped when they saw her. The thin one laughed. "She's still here," he muttered, in heavily accented English. "Even better." The man with the rifle raised the barrel, sighting casually. Then everything shattered. The elephant exploded into motion, not toward them, but sideways. She slammed into the trees like a wrecking ball, shattering limbs, sending a cascade of bark and leaves into the air. The sound was thunderous, primal, a surge of chaos, not violence, confusion. Derek seized the moment. He activated his satellite beacon, shoved it deep into the soil, then gripped the calf under its front legs and hauled. The calf moaned, but moved. He dragged it, inch by inch, behind a wall of exposed roots and ferns. Just as the first shot cracked, the elephant screamed. A sound pulled from some ancient grief, a tearing of the earth's voice itself. Another shot rang out, then silence. Derek threw himself over the calf, shielding its body. His ears rang, the scent of gunpowder mixed with blood and sap. Then, distant at first, then closer, a rhythmic chopping. The sound of a helicopter. Rescue. Above the treetops, the poachers cursed, scrambled, vanished into the underbrush like rats at dawn. And still, the mother stood, blood on her flank, unyielding, unbroken, a sentinel of something greater than instinct, the raw, unrelenting force of love. The sun hung low, spilling molten gold through the canopy as Derek stood at the edge of the ranger compound, a worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked bark and the musky perfume of growing things, the living breath of the jungle. Behind him, the team prepared his departure with quiet hands and lowered voices, as if speaking too loudly might unravel the weight of what had been built here. For weeks after the rescue, the mother elephant had remained near the perimeter, never breaching the invisible line between wild and human, but never straying far. She was always there at dusk, a hulking silhouette beneath the trees, watching, waiting. Not with expectation, but with presence. A solemn acknowledgement. Each time Derek approached the recovery enclosure where the calf nursed back to life, he could feel her eyes on him, unwavering. She never moved when he passed, but when he spoke softly to the calf or replenished its water, she would let out a low, thunderous hum, barely audible, more vibration than sound, like a cathedral organ buried beneath the soil. In those moments, Derek had no need for words. No language could have honored what had passed between them. The calf, whom the rangers began calling Chandi, moonlight in Thai, had fully healed. Her strength returned quickly, her steps playful and defiant, her trust in humans surprising and complete. But her mother never approached the enclosure. She left that to Derek, as if understanding her child needed both worlds to survive now, the wild and the hand that reached in to save her. Now, on the final day, Derek turned from the trail and followed an unspoken pull through the jungle. The trees closed around him like old friends, their shadows familiar, their roots memorized by his boots. He didn't need to think about where he was going. His feet knew. His heart knew. When he reached the ravine, that wound in the earth where life had nearly ended, she was waiting. Not near it. In it. She stood where her calf had once been trapped, her eyes meeting his as if to say, "Here is where it began, and here is where I say goodbye." She stepped forward, the ground trembling with her weight, and reached out her trunk, not urgently, not in grief, but with deliberate, sacred grace. She pressed it to the center of his chest and held it there. A single touch, like a seal, a benediction. And then she turned without hesitation and vanished into the trees, not looking back. Derek remained frozen, his breath shallow, his throat locked tight. And in that silence, something inside him, something long buried beneath ash and noise, broke open. The tears came soundlessly, not hot with sorrow but warm with recognition. She had given him something he hadn't known he'd lost. Meaning, honor, witness. Not to the man he had been, but to the one he had become.